Welcome to Status Update, the social media and creator podcast that you can listen to whilst you're working, because this is a work podcast. I'm Stevie Johnson, MD of Disrupt and ex-television personality. As always today, I am joined by my friend, colleague, and the voice of Gen Z, Jake Crabb.
Hi, I'm Jake. You probably don't know me yet, but hopefully in time you will.
Today's guest was the co-founder of Social Chain and previous EY Entrepreneur of the Year winner. It's Don McGregor. And in this episode, we cover...
Right, we're going to brands and talk to them about social media. Their first response will be, well, it's going to disappear. Steve obviously was just so talented at that. You know, the guy's phenomenally articulate.
When I was in my mid-20s, I didn't know what my passion was.
The transition from founder to CEO is not the one you think you should take. And this is actually quite strange for me to say now. Probably wasn't drinking. It was understanding my emotions and how to manage them.
So whether you're on your commute, you're at work, taking your break, jump in. This is Status Update. Welcome back to you, the listener, for another episode of Status Update. Status Update has ventured up to Manchester today, the first time we've gone out of London.
Podcast on tour.
Exactly. And I'm super excited to introduce Don McGregor, who's joined us today. Welcome, Dom.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for coming to Manchester. Really appreciate it.
Of course. We were more than happy to do it for you. You know, before we go into the icebreaker, when Jake and I first put together ideas for this podcast, you were the first name that I wrote down as wanting to have on it.
Must have been a very dry session.
But no, I always thought with what we're trying to achieve and the stories that we're trying to tell that you would be great. So I'm really, really happy.
Really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So hopefully this lives up to expectations.
Fingers crossed.
I'm sure it will. We try and break the ice with each of our guests. And the way that we do that is to ask if you can look back at a time when you updated your status on social media when you were younger, and you look back at it now and you cringe.
So like, this is probably part of my story.
Yeah.
I was that kid at probably 16 to what that was, like 14 years ago. Yeah. At 16 who, like, the minute like Facebook released status updates was like updating statuses all the time. Like all the time. I was that person, you know, I think you could used to call them like Facebook warriors, who was always on Facebook, always saying what they did. That was me. So like when it comes to my memories, I haven't deleted any of them. There's loads of them. I'm just like, oh my God.
Is that one that springs to mind?
It's the one that springs to mind. There's a couple of, not the one that springs to mind from like a negative perspective, but there was one where like I first tasted virality.
Yeah.
And it was like a picture of Wayne Rooney play against Arsenal, where he's holding his back and it looks like he's in a threesome with two other players.
Yeah,
that got like 300 likes. I was like, this is like cool.
Yeah.
I wonder if I've got a future in this.
That's exactly what I was thinking. But if there's one that gave like a cringe, like they're all riddled with like humongous grammar and spelling issues.
I think that's what Facebook was for, though, wasn't it? Like putting cringy statuses all purposely misspelled.
They weren't cringy at the time. They were cool though.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing like baby love you kind of thing. I was just like Dom played well at football today.
Yeah.
And that was just me posting it. Or like has got town fever, which was this term I invented when like honestly it's like this thing I invented with my mates. I invented it. I'm taking claim over it. Where like, you know, you get to like Friday and like you're getting a little bit palms, getting a little bit sweaty, you're getting that kind of like sense of I need to go out. So like for a while, like I was trying to make like town fever a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a whole host of statuses about like definition of town fever and what that was. So
Yeah.
that's probably the cringy thing.
I'm definitely going to start using town fever on a Friday now, I think.
Yeah.
I take it none of the town fever ones went viral.
Look, it was before like virality. It was like when everything was
right.
like closed networks. But if I tried to make town fever a thing when like things were at like the peak, definitely could have made like town fever a thing.
Love that.
Well, obviously, as you briefly alluded to there, your story or journey started with a drunken tweet whilst you were at uni.
Yep.
Which eventually led to, obviously, you and Steven connected up and then eventually founded a social chain. You spoke about your story loads of times before, but if you could briefly touch on how you go from a drunken tweet at a night out at uni to building this massive agency.
Yeah, I think a lot of this kind of stuff's about timing, you know. Yeah. As we kind of alluded to, social media was maturing quite a lot, and you started to have networks where it wasn't just about keeping up with your friends, you know, you could start finding random people across the world. And I started to get obsessed a little bit with Twitter at the time when, you know, you could tweet Rihanna and Stephen Fry was on there and all these kind of celebrities were like using it. And for some reason I've got, tell you what it actually was, and you know this, it's actually the weeds from Made in Chelsea.
Yeah.
So she went to my university in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know why, but like, you know, it was just interesting to see when she's in the library and that kind of stuff and little stuff like that, which was going on. And I just kind of found it really interesting, this kind of like connectivity piece. But then also kind of there's other side of Twitter, which was football. I'm a big football fan.
Mm-hmm.
And you started to see a couple of the kind of funny things coming out of reactions to games and stuff. And I was like, that's cool. This is quite funny. And I've always kind of liked comedy and, you know, sharing stuff.
Yeah.
So hence the Wayne Rooney thing.
Yep.
And I thought, you know what, why don't I just tweet about what's going on with me as a life? And, you know, what could I call it? Well, let's call it problems at uni, and, you know, let's badge it up university and share just, you know, what all students are going through, kind of stuff we're actually speaking about every single day at university. And yeah, I think the reason why it's successful is because I was just a stereotypical student. You know, all the problems I was facing were the same as every single other student. You know, like for realizing how expensive like cheese is for the first time.
Oh my god! I specifically remember being in the aisle. I think it was at Morrison's. I'm thinking, I can't believe how expensive that block of cheese is. Like £4. So I'm not paying that
for cheese.
Yeah.
Like you have at home every single time. You go into the fridge at home. There's always cheese there.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't think about the economics behind
no.
it. Oh. So all this stuff was just so relatable and relevant. So it kind of got a following, and then what kind of happened over the next couple of years was just a wave of people using social media more and more, more kind of meme comedy accounts popping up. And what we effectively did there was kind of monopolize the student sector, which was quite nice because it was very general. So you could have the ability to launch other pages in other sectors. So we could launch other pages in fashion, food, fitness, sport, and build a kind of following. And the way it works is if you had an audience, this is how it used to work. If you had an audience, if you created something new or a new page, you would reach that entire audience. So very quickly, you know, when we got to the peak, there was days when we were making new pages on Facebook, which would get 250,000 followers in a day.
Wow.
And it's like, that was like a good day for us. And we were just tracking all the network growth over months. And it was just like, if we had a new idea, let's go and make it happen. And because you could reach everyone and everyone saw it, and there was much less activity on social media, you know, the platforms haven't changed. You've still got Instagram, you've still got Facebook, you've still got Twitter, but like there's so many more creators.
Yeah.
At that point, there was a lot of consumers, but not many creators.
Yeah.
So we kind of came in very early, were creators in the sector, and yeah, grew a following from that.
And I suppose it was at a time as well where brands knew less about social media and what they could do.
Oh, brands knew nothing.
Yeah.
You know, we go into brands and talk to them about social media. Their first response would be, "Well, it's going to disappear." Because well, if you're a marketing manager, say you're a marketing manager in 2014 or director, and you've had 10 years experience, you know, you've been in the business since 2004. You know, you've seen Bebo, Friends Reunited, MySpace, all these things come and go.
Yeah.
And you just assume nothing's going to stick. And when you think about the internet, you know, you're just getting into the internet of things. You know, you're starting to spend money on Google. This YouTube thing, like, you're like, it's for kids. So you haven't got a view on it. You're still putting money into big TV campaigns. You're still trying to get a Ant and Dec Saturday Night Live takeaway spot. And that's how the system was. It wasn't built on bottom up. It was based on broadcast. And, you know, we know what it's like now from a marketing perspective. It's completely changed.
Yeah.
But back then, a marketing director who had 10 years experience was probably a little bit set in their ways as well.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah.
It's an interesting way of looking at it. And with the virality and everything taking off, the sheer speed at which social chain grew and the age you were at the time, there must have been some pretty unique challenges that were thrown your way when building a business.
100%. And I think the challenges to building a business in general are very tough. You know, I've got so much respect for anyone who actually goes and does it, because it's not easy. You know, you got nowhere to put anything at the end of the day. It always comes back with you. You've got responsibilities and accountabilities that you always have to adhere to. So, I think I've learned that the hard way. You know, you think, you know, 1 minute you're at university struggling to get up for a 3 p.m. lecture, which was me. Honestly, second year, all I had was like 4 lectures after 3 p.m. And there was days when I was like, can't make that.
Wow.
That's rough. Or,
Yeah.
To a year later, having a team of 20 people, and you're like, you know, the elasticity of individuals isn't that great to be able to expand that much in a year. So, you know, we're growing in ourselves, the business is growing, the market's growing, and it literally was an 18-month window where social media actually just like, okay, this is a thing. This is a thing, and we need to figure out what it is. So you get inundated by brands all the time being like, first we need to understand what social media is, and the second we need to know how to use it. And yeah, you just get if that was to happen right now, when we had the business and we had our mindset now, we would handle it so much differently than we did back then, because we didn't know what we were as a business. You know, we didn't know this whole thing about agencies and what agencies do and how it works. And so someone said to us in a pitch meeting, "Oh, so you like an agency then?" And we're like, "Yeah, I guess so."
That sounds good.
Yeah.
But I know the feeling in the sense that once you put that agency label on you, you almost feel like you need to play by the old school agency rules a little bit, as opposed to you just doing what's working in front of you.
100%. And I think in one sense it helped us get a bit of identity and know how to go talk to people. But in the other, it became kind of like a burden, because, you know, then you put in like a category of like, but people need rules, people need to understand things. So if you've got a marketing director who's looking for an agency, it's much easier to win that business or be involved in that business than anything else. You know, I think more about it, like we could have been, and the role that we think social was playing, and how people were kind of needing to think through social first lens in their business, which for me is everything from, you know, packaging, it's from tone on website, it is marketing, it's even the product. You know, how can people think more socially? I think we were more of, and had more potential in that kind of like management consultancy space. But because we kind of labeled ourselves and we did marketing, and that was one part we were really good at, we got a lot of work in that area, rather than like how I think like social should have been used back then, is like businesses needed to think social first. And we were basically saying, if you don't think social first, your business will die. And there's definitely a lot of businesses which have fit into that category, including ones we've spoken to in that time who didn't move with the trends, and they're now extinct.
Interesting. And I think I could imagine as well, at a young age, probably was a bit of a challenge, you know, being taken seriously with some of these big companies who maybe laughed you out the room when you were like, you know, you need to look at this from a social first lens.
I think with this element of marketing, there was definitely a lot of respect, given the fact that there's not many times you can walk into a room at 21 years old and have done something for 2 years and be an expert. There's not many times that happens, but social media is one of those periods where we could say we were an expert because we have lived and breathed it. I think when you started to go further upstream into the businesses and trying to like get into that category, it was, you know, that's not right for you.
Right.
Did you ever have any moments when you were growing the business where you did kind of go approach a client or go into one of those meetings where you were literally just shut down on the spot?
No, I think there was a couple where, as I say, right in the very, very early days, where brands like, well, we don't think it's going to be around. So we're not interested in hearing. But there was never someone who kind of took a meeting, was receptive and warm, and then laughed us out of the room. That never kind of happened. I think as I say, that 18 months was very, like, when social became this thing, was like a wave of like acceptance. When people were like, okay, actually social media is something I need to learn about it. And the difficulty we had is, like, as you said there about the problems growing a business, is we're trying to figure out what the business is. We're trying to figure out who we are. Now we're also trying to figure out what our clients need. If our entire focus, and this comes with age and experience, was figuring out what our clients need, and we didn't have to figure out what the business was going to be, or how to hire people, or payroll, or, you know, a 20-year-old guy, like, who do I want to be myself? You know, it'd be very different. But again, naivety and immaturity was what kind of made it beautiful as well.
Did you have to spend much time kind of as on top of the things that you've just said, proving to people that this has the legs, it is going to stick around? Or did you instill faith in them some other way?
I think the big blocker was other agencies. You know, when you've got people like media agencies who are kind of holding the spend on TV and print, like, the relationship back then would be the marketing budget would have been handed over to the agencies and they'd have control over it. So there was a few times when we would be speaking to a client and they were like, we want to work with this business, you need to find budget to make it work. And then they'd go, can't really make that work because we don't want them to work with another agency. So our job and responsibility was to get the clients as excited as possible about social media, so that two things would happen. One, next year they'd put a budget line in for it. And two, they'd work with them directly. So it was kind of, you know, I'd imagine every single business now has every consumer business and kind of in the sector would have a influencer marketing budget.
We're definitely seeing more of that every year coming in, which is great for us to disrupt.
It's great because there's actually budget to it. But
exactly.
When we were talking, it was like the conversations was, how do we find the budget for this? Like, there's budgets here and there's budget pots here, but we need to find it.
I mean, it's like we've alluded to in kind of several of the thought leadership pieces that we've put out over the last kind of year, 2 years. It's the influencer marketing industry specifically has grown from this test channel, which was if brand had a bit of spare budget laying around, they'd do it. now it's the core of their marketing,
Yeah.
their digital marketing strategy.
Well, I think on average it's something like the stat I read next year is it's up between 10 and 20% of an overall marketing budget now is being put into influencer, whereas a couple of years ago it was maybe 1 to 2%.
Well, the evolution would be would have been marketing budget, it'd have been social budget, and it'd have been social media, then influencer budget. Because that, again, when we were pitching, a lot of the budget was the social budget, which then included influencers as well. And now that piece is spun out.
Exactly.
And that's these big businesses. Yeah, they're very simple. They work to budget lines. If they have budget to spend, they spend it.
Yeah.
But when they don't have a budget line for something, they go, where are we going to find this budget from?
Yeah, exactly.
We know all of them. We know money's there and stuff, but they need to allocate it against something which is agreed with their seniors. Otherwise, they come back and say, the seniors go, why the hell you spend this money when you've not been approved it? So again, learning how they operate, big corps operate, was a big insight into how we should position ourselves. And if you've been in the industry 5 years, 10 years, you've got that insight already.
When people think of social chain now, often Steven Bartlett's the name that comes up a lot. Was it always the plan for you to be more behind the scenes?
Again, I think you're giving us a bit too much respect for assuming there was a plan.
Yeah.
Especially in the early days. No, I'm joking. We're very, very different people. And I think if something landed on our desks and it was an email, we look at each other and we just know who's going to do it, deal with it. And it was just that kind of, relationship we had in the sense of that our skill set was complementary. Yeah. So we just spent time where the other person was weakest and the other person was best. Yeah. So yeah, the interesting, again, my background was building content and was the content. And then the minute you put me in front of the content, I panicked at that young age. Right. I enjoy being faceless. There's a reason why it wasn't Don McGregor's problems. Yeah. The reason it was student problems. I kind of liked I didn't like the speaking on camera, that kind of stuff. And the other side, Steve obviously was just so talented at that. The guy's phenomenally articulate. The way he can construct points is just like unique and not seen in anyone ever. So like the minute you put him on stage or in front of a camera, his proposition is fantastic. Yeah. And like for me, like, God, that was like sat there. I remember when back in the earlier days, we go on stage, he'd do a talk, and I'd be there making like things trend on Twitter, and it was just like that. Yeah, it just worked. And he, a couple of talks, he'd be like, "Okay, we showed you this hashtag at the start of the conversation, and now it's trending number 1 on Twitter."
Yeah, that's awesome.
And like that was like a party trick, which got us so much tension. But it was like he wouldn't be sat there doing it. Trend, and I wouldn't be on stage.
So it seemed like a partnership. That it worked.
And that's relationships. And I think as you grow as a company and you kind of start to eke out more responsibility and more times, you want your best people posted in the right place. This is why I give advice to a lot of founders now is like the transition from founder to CEO is not the one you think you should take. A lot of people who found a business think they should be CEO. That is not the case. Founders are entrepreneurs. They're a bit more, they don't do structure, they don't do reporting. I can speak as a founder in my position. There is much better people to be a CEO. There's no one better to be a founder because you are always a founder, but there's much better people to be a CEO. So I would love to see more founders understand that their transition as into the corporate structure isn't CEO. It is probably CMO, chief brand, product.
Yeah, would you say that founders are more like the kind of original big idea person?
The visionary.
Yeah, the visionary. And then the technicalities is the CEO.
100%. And I think if a founder was to come to me and say, "This is my business, this is how I started, this is my plan, I'm going to hire a CEO and I'm going to do this," I'd be like, yes, because you understand your weaknesses. There's not much enjoyment in a CEO. You got to deal with people problems, you got to deal with finance problems, you got to deal with operations and all that kind of stuff, and take ultimate accountability for things. The founder is the visionary. They can put the
fun stuff.
Yeah, and I think Ben Francis did this really, really well with Jim Sharkey. He came into CEO role, probably realized it wasn't a CEO. Brought in a team around him, and now he's gone back into the CEO role.
Because he was CMO, wasn't he?
Yeah. I think he's now 30, 31. Probably feels like it's the right time for him to be a CEO, and it's probably fair.
If there's ever an example of like a successful launch from founder to then obviously CMO to then back to CEO, Jim Shark's got to be it, right?
100%. And I think there's this kind of thing in entrepreneurs where the reason to start businesses is because they don't want anyone else telling them what to do.
Yeah.
You know, they want to be in charge. And I think the idea of hiring, like when you look at every single org chart, who's at the top? CEO. You know, it's just, that's how it happens. So the idea of a founder bringing in a CEO is probably contradictory to their idea of having freedom.
Yeah.
So it thinks like it's restrictive, but it's the best thing you can do for business.
I suppose, yeah, it should be viewed as more of like a working partnership than like
100%
a structural thing.
Yeah. And you can just offload the other stuff you don't like, especially individual, especially solo founders.
Yeah.
I'm not, obviously this is kind of a generalization to a lot of people, but like, yeah, and especially if you're in a pair, it's a bit differently because you tend to have those personalities like Steve and I, where you can offset that kind of responsibility. But if you're a solo founder and you are the one that lives and breathes the product and the business, you know, making the CEO is not, you know, is your next progression is not always the right choice.
Yeah. As obviously as co-founder, and we're going to move on from some social change stuff because there's lots we want to get through. But in the news earlier this year was all around the social chain sale to Brave Bison, and were you surprised at confusion out there? This was at 7.7 million, and people seem to think it might have gone for more, and weren't aware of the structure between social chain and social chain AG. Was it?
Yeah, I think I can't really comment on it too much because it was after my time, and like, you know, we did transactions, we did stuff, and the similarity in the names and brands was there. But from my perspective, it's after my time, and what happens next in that world is nothing to do with me. And it, you know, I wish everyone best, but it's not much to do with me.
Not your problem.
As I say, you know, I feel like not like I feel like I got PTSD again, but you know, I think being in the agency service space, I learned fundamental issues with the client agency relationship.
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy it all the time. It always felt like there was an imbalance in terms of like just a lot of the processes, the way relationships were handled, the way you could be cut after just no reason.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really like the client service space. I didn't really like agencies in general. So like when I was starting Fearless, what I was looking at was like the fundamental problems there. And the two kind of things identified was, one, it's very hard to work with fast-paced growing companies because they don't have the budget pots that are set out, as we spoke about there, with like Coca-Cola saying there's a budget pot. But also so how can agencies work with those? And then secondly, it's like, how then actually, if you do a really good job, how do you share the upside? So like with these fast growth companies, you're fighting to get retainers because they're on rapid growth and cash is tight, but then they've got huge potential, and then you could make that potential realized, but then you only take your fee, which you've got to fight for in the first place. So it's like, surely there's some kind of like model where service providers can work with fast growth companies, and what does that look like? And I was like, okay, the only solution there is having an alignment, so therefore it has to be investment. So the client service space taught me a lot, and of what I don't want in my life.
So is that now based on those experiences that you had earlier in your career has basically set you on the path to what you're doing now at Fearless Ventures?
100%. You know, it sounds great working with big brands like Amazon, TikTok, Coca-Cola. You know, to be able to say we're involved in TikTok's marketing in the UK, amazing, you know. But really, it's just mercenary work for hire. And while I enjoyed it, and I thought, look, there's some really good learnings here, and you know, how to structure a team and marketing and that kind of stuff, and the sales process was great. I was like, again, you know, I enjoyed the early days, and this is kind of there's two areas of thought here. One, it's the agency got too big and we got too structured, or two, I didn't enjoy it. I don't know whether it's one or the other, but in the early days, we worked with founders. You know, we spent time with the founders, you know, understanding their product, their business, what they were trying to achieve, their personal ambitions. And as we scaled, suddenly, you know, you get put in the box of marketing director or CMO, or you're further away from the actual having an impact on the business. So having that exposure early on to working with very much founders on the challenges, probably why I didn't know we were an agency, because we were actually just doing everything. You know, we were doing, you know, product and app build and that kind of stuff, to then being higher work from marketing directors. I was like, actually, the more meaningful stuff is working with founders. So I always said, coming out with next was, alongside whatever it is, I want to work with founders, and now just the founder relationship. Because the minute you deter from there, it's like people in the team have different incentives. The marketing director's got a different incentive than the founder. It can become,
it's amazing, because I never knew that story about why you went into Fearless Ventures, and it based on your background doing client service stuff. It can feel like as you scale and you're working with different types of marketing directors and so on, that it becomes a little bit more transactional, and being able to drive the real value that you've had.
But I think the other side of it is that I got further away from the work as well. So like I was further away from the work. We were further away from having an impact on the client, and it felt transactional. If one of those things, if I was heavily involved with the work, probably would have enjoyed it more. But I wasn't very much like involved in the sales. But yeah, that's where it came from. It was all shaped on the ideas of like what I've learned from agency services and like what actually do fast-paced companies go to. Because at SocialChain, we probably worked with 1% of our inquiries, 1,000 inquiries a year, worked with 10 of businesses, something like that.
Yeah.
The majority of the businesses were too small.
Yeah.
But they all, and there's I guarantee you go in our emails from SocialChain, 5-6 years ago, look at some of those businesses. I guarantee, and I know for a fact that some of them are true, some of those businesses now are in the top 10 something times faster growing company. Wow. But we ignore them because they're too small.
Yeah.
So like,
nice problems to have.
Well, you got to find the right balance.
Find the right balance, You obviously can't take risks with a company you're starting, and they're trying to do things and market it, because you've got staff to pay. But like, there's companies there which are now the fastest growing companies in the UK.
Yeah.
They figured it out, they've grown, but at the time they couldn't afford a retainer.
And it's difficult as well sometimes when there's the promise of additional budget if you can make a success of something. The amount of times I've had a conversation with a brand that says, this is our starting budget, make a success of it. There's plenty of more to see. So it tempts you into wanting to do it, but ultimately you've got to look at your margins, etc., what the cost is to your business, and make that call, which is why you need a minimum threshold. Yeah,
and the crazy thing now about working in VC is like the first thing we get when you work in Fearless, so the first thing we see for anything else is their management accounts. Imagine being in an agency and the first thing you see is the management accounts. Like,
could make life better, well, easier, I guess.
Imagine the level of intricacy you can go to make a marketing plan based on knowing their numbers, their margins, their products.
Exactly.
And I'm like, we have a 20-minute call with someone, and I'm like, send over your management accounts.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, sure. And I was like, I never got that level of information from an agency. Yeah. But I'm like, okay, I look at businesses and go, actually, this is really good. We can do this and this.
Yeah.
Or you look at business and go, oh, this is not one for us. But there'll be businesses there which you're like, this has got huge potential.
Yeah.
And then we look at that and go, okay, we can invest in this and we can help it grow. It's such a weird thing. Is like, if a company sent over the management accounts to an agency, obviously, I don't think it'll ever happen, but you get so much better transparency.
We'll try and ask actually next time.
Try and ask.
I have a conversation.
See what they say. Say to the founder, send over your management accounts and we'll see if we can work together.
So would you say now then, Dom, that what you do now, investing in businesses, working with founders, kind of building these new companies, would you say that's your passion? Yeah,
I think if I was to distill it down to like what the passion in that area is like helping founders solve problems.
Yeah.
And seeing like what happens off the back of that.
Yeah, like kind of growing
the
them.
growth, seeing the hard work that they put in and like building the foundations to be able to unlock opportunities. Yeah, I really enjoy that.
You must thrive off the success of what they then eventually go off to.
Yeah, I mean it's I say I've learned a lot over my time, and that if that can help someone else on their journey and they can then go and be successful, that's so much more meaningful for me. It took me a while to realize what the passion is, and I think it wasn't servicing clients. I think that was great and it was enjoyable, but it was like what got it for me was seeing the team grow. Seeing them
amazing.
Not expand my numbers, but as people.
Yeah.
I remember the first time someone got a house, and I was sat to myself, oh my God, we're responsible for this person's mortgage now. So we got to make sure we're doing stuff. And then you see people grow up and have kids and develop in the professional world as well. And like that was the most rewarding thing for me. Was like seeing other people develop. So I think that's what I kind of took away from like, how can you make that development piece commercial?
Yeah, and I think with that, it said it took a while to find your passion. I think there's a lot of pressure on young people now to know exactly what they should be doing or what their passion is right away. And actually it takes time and being in industry to work it out for yourself. I'm 34. When I was in my mid-20s, I didn't know what my passion was. Didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Still certain moments where I might wake up and question a few things.
Hopefully not what I've said when you question it.
But there's definitely a sense that you feel fulfilled with the work that you're doing now. And, we've got a relationship from messaging a few times, never really met in person. But from what I understand is there were maybe times before when you were less fulfilled and things were quite intense.
Yeah. I think, again, it comes back to like knowing yourself as well. I think, obviously openly I had a problem with alcohol while starting the first business, and that was tough. And that was very tough. And that was largely, I'm writing a book about it at the moment around like how to manage your relationship with alcohol. And it's very difficult because like a lot of it is ingrained in you from a young age. I've been looking at research and looking at how and why people drink. And there's some statistics like if you drink for the first time before you're 14 years old, you're like 25% more likely to be an addict when you're older.
25 times.
25% more likely.
25%. Yeah.
So one drink at 14
Yeah.
can have a knock-on
Yeah,
impact. And what I distilled it down for me was like an emotion management tool.
Right.
So it was,
like kind of numbing.
yeah.
Anxiety or stress or anything.
Well, the crazy thing is I didn't know what it was numbing.
Yeah.
So like I was like having these feelings and having these thoughts, and I was like, okay, just gonna have a drink.
As soon as they start to rear their head, it's
exactly. So like for me, like the problem wasn't. And this is actually quite strange for me to say now. Problem for me wasn't drinking. It was understanding my emotions and how to manage them.
Yeah.
So the advice I got was to take the drink away, because that's actually just making more problems. It compounds issues. You know, no one's ever got to the 4 a.m. in the morning and gone, have an epiphany.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It was like that was about moving that away and then being able to deal with the problems. Then what I kind of realized was that the problems are always going to be there. You know, I'm always going to have those feelings, those moods. If you bring alcohol back into the mix, then there's an increased likelihood that the problems are going to get worse. So I was like, okay, alcohol needs to stay away from it, but ultimately I need to learn how to manage my emotions myself.
And would you say that's like the biggest way your life has changed since giving up alcohol? Your ability to manage your emotions, your feelings?
Yeah, I think it has. I think it gave me the headspace and the clarity to be able to address the problems. And I think the funniest thing about like the 360 drinking is like the number one reason people don't want to not drink is because of social pressures. I think the single reason why I don't drink now is because of social pressure. Because if people thought I was drinking and saw me drinking, oh my God.
Because you spoke so much about it publicly.
Exactly. So my kind of like conclusion with it is like everything you think about alcohol is the same about sobriety.
Yeah.
But all you don't have is the negative impacts. Yeah.
Well, I saw a clip. You were on the news, and I loved when you said like alcohol is the only drug you have to justify not having, not taking. That makes complete sense. You know, you've also said within our culture and society, shows like Towie, Made in Chelsea, Geordie Shore.
I don't know if I named Made in Chelsea. Actually, I think I named Made in Chelsea. Actually, I don't think I named Towie. Actually.
Well, yeah. Well, those types of shows are kind of have a responsibility for, you know, promoting alcohol within, you know, in society.
Was that off a Made in Chelsea episode? That I think it was a.
You were on a news show.
Oh no, it's about the study that I saw how much alcohol was on screen time.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
It was like 80% of screen time had alcohol in it.
And do you know what's interesting about that is when I was on Made in Chelsea, in certain scenes, we were allowed to have a drink, obviously, especially if it was a proper scene where you're with someone and you're at an event or a party and so on. But all of the, I'll probably get in trouble for like revealing this stuff, but always cut it potentially. All of the pretty shots that you get, so when you're looking at the party happening and it's not focused on two people speaking or interacting, but it's showing the event and the party, and you see people cheersing and so on, we would have Schlur in our champagne glasses. So even though people weren't drinking, they wanted to show
they wanted to still promote that out. Yeah,
exactly.
Lifestyle. Yeah.
Exactly. And even if someone didn't necessarily want to drink, they would be in their scene with that glass of Schlur to make it look like they're having a glass of champagne as well.
Saves on budget as well, I bet.
Yeah. But then again, like, anytime you were in a scene you wanted to drink, like
you could have
like they'd be like, you know, a gin and tonic or whatever it is, have a few of them. You know, a scene might take an hour, and it's cut into a couple of minutes. But there was always the ability to have it, and I think I don't want to sit here and say that production wanted us to be drunk to do. I know other shows that is the case.
Yeah.
On our show that was never the case, but it was definitely encouraged to, you know, loosen up a little bit.
Yeah. But it's also, like you say, it's the image it creates.
Yeah.
You know, what they're trying to portray is that the glamorization of alcohol. To have a good time, you need to have a drink.
Yeah.
I don't know why I don't know how and why. It's really interesting why that was become so deep rooted in our society. But like, you think about going to a friend's 30th, you know, or, you know, someone's present. Like, what do you buy them? Alcohol. And like, you know, imagine going and buy someone a pack of fags saying happy birthday.
Yeah.
You know, that probably used to happen. People probably used to do that.
Yeah.
You know, back in like the 50s or 60s maybe, I don't know. But like, that's a similar comparison of like, you know, it's all brand and marketing, obviously, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that happy birthday is a bottle of champagne.
Do you think influencers should take more responsibility for alcohol promotion? Do you think there should be regulation around it, or?
Well, there is a little bit of regulation at the moment, but I like your point.
Kind of
like should influence
to what extent?
agencies? Yeah.
I think it's like I think the issue is I don't think influencers can change it. I think it's to that point around TV, it's deep rooted in culture. You go to every single movie, every single association. It's just like the assumption that something good happens, something bad happens, you have a drink.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, you can't rewrite every single piece of like media that's ever existed. So I think it's just that relationship is so like close. And basically the premise of the book is like that relationship with everyone exists. Everyone's got a relationship with alcohol. You know, even if you don't drink, even if you do drink, you've got a relationship. And even though that relationship, and like every relationship has times when it's healthy and positive, there are times when you have to understand that it could be negative. And you've got to ask yourself the question, in a situation when maybe things aren't going your way and you're having problems, you're not feeling very well, is it alcohol? And I think that for me, my perspective was that I blamed everyone else and everything else other than the fact that I was drinking. And what actually happened to the point where I actually had to say the problem's alcohol was like for me to hit rock bottom.
And did you find that yourself? Or did someone say to you,
someone said it,
you need to stop?
Someone said it to me.
Yeah.
So it's like it's the one thing where you don't recognize it in yourself because it's an addiction. You sleepwalk into it and you slowly become more obsessed with it. So I think what I'm trying to get is that if people see it a little bit higher up in like a sense, and again, part of it is being 22-year-old lad and 23-year-old lad is like, you know, you don't see it. You know, maybe a 40-year-old would see it more often, maybe not. I'm not there yet.
And also at the time, you know, you were building this, you know, incredible agency. You probably felt pretty good about yourself as well, you know, out in the beers.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Of course it is.
So just trying to get that, like, is it alcohol question a little bit higher up in people's minds to think maybe if I change and manage my relationship with alcohol, I'll be better, because it definitely had a big impact with me.
Yeah.
Well, no, look, thanks for sharing about a lot of that stuff, Dom. It's hard hitting, but amazing to hear the journey you've been on as part of it. One of the things we kind of like to discuss towards the end of a recording is around the future of social, and as a social guru yourself and everything that you've achieved. What would you say?
Nice little buzzword thrown in there, Stevie.
What do you think is going to be the biggest? What do you think is going to be the biggest way that social media evolves over the next 12 months or 24 months?
So we were talking before we actually started filming about like my feelings towards TikTok.
Yeah.
And like, so we did TikTok's marketing in 2019. You know, we brought it over to the UK. I think we got influencers.
So this is just before the real boom in 2020, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we marketed it. So we saw it coming, and we jumped all our media brands on there. So we were like creating content on it very, very early, and then we were marketing it by, you know, getting people on it. It was one of our biggest clients, and like I saw that coming down the road, and I was like, God, do I, you know, you start to see that, you know, back in the early days, like the screen, the captions, the singing. It's like, God, do I really want to invest in this to be able to learn, to be able to sell it? Because you need to be able to sell it offensively. Mentally, I was like, no, I'm like ready to look at other options and leaving the business because I don't want to be involved in this anymore. The theory was right. You know, TikTok has dominated. It's gone on to become like, you know, this mega platform. You know, if you told people 7 years ago, we know a platform, people would have backed Snapchat maybe and said, oh, that's going to be the kind of cult thing. So, you know, we don't know what's going to come down the line with future platforms and future ways of consuming. And I think that might happen with a change of hardware and change of, you know, how we consume content. But, you know, what's also happened in the last couple of years has been a real maturity and stability of existing platforms like YouTube, for example. You know, you look at Google's ad revenue now, where it comes from. You know, YouTube is a huge part of it. There's a real crave for meaningful long-form content, knowing people better, while, you know, you have got the dopamine hits with TikTok just going like that. So my kind of big, I guess I can't really say big because, you know, but a lot of people talk about this stuff anyway. You know, I don't think I've got an original kind of like glass ball to say this is where I would go. But really good, deeper relationships in the influencer marketing space. You know, the transactional time is gone. You know, we can't just put a dress on someone and expect it to sell.
Exactly.
So you need to utilize that in a better way, and we're starting to see that with M&S doing really good things like collections. And
I was thinking about M&S this morning.
Well,
yeah, because they've got Sienna Miller now.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've noticed a shift in M&S over the last couple of months.
Really,
Sparks is cool now, mate.
Yeah, back in the FTSE 100.
Yeah,
I think that's age as well, though. You know.
Yeah, that's very.
It's age. I walked through it. I was like, this is cool. It's affordable. Yeah.
It's age.
And listen, I'm the voice of Gen Z, and I was in there yesterday getting some bits for holiday. So
Yeah, heard it first. Gen Z likes Marks and Spencer.
But we'll see those relationships getting deeper, getting more meaningful.
Deeper relationships. I like that as a takeaway.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think that's where I would get focused on, is like deeper, stronger relationships, less transactional. If I was an influencer now, I'd only try to have 5 brand relationships, but get right into the businesses.
Yeah.
Own products, own ranges, collaborations, that kind of thing. It's no longer kind of like fit for higher purpose.
Exactly.
So yeah, that deeper relationships, I think, and then I could take a step back from what I was saying there. I think we're all craving that. We're all craving deeper meaning, deeper connections.
I think that's a perfect way to wrap things up. Deeper relationships. We'll take that away with us down to London, Jake.
Absolutely.
And we'll always try and put that into what we're doing with Disrupt as well. But Don, thank you very much for updating your status with us and for having us in Manchester. I'll hand over to Jake.
Guys, thank you so much for updating your status with us. We've loved being in the studio and chatting with Dom today. If you've enjoyed today's episode of Status Update, why not follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you found today's discussion insightful, share it with your friends or colleagues to keep them in the loop. Once again, thanks for stopping by for this episode of Status Update. We'll see you in the next one.